group. We have a group of approximately 22 staff, community members, and parents. This is a significant, though modeled after the Washington School Closure Committee, it is a broader-based representation in that we have more parents. We have community members whose children either may have graduated or have not yet entered school. We have a young lady who is a school planner in an architectural firm whose children have not yet entered school, who provides a unique insight and a lot of expertise in the area. So part of our work was to provide information, get to know one another, and get started on this work. And the other piece that the committee spoke about, addressed, and approved is that we wanted a committee member to actually give the reports to the board, not myself. And so Mr. Robert Luther, a parent in the community from Gearing Elementary and other schools, well, he'll introduce himself, was designated as that committee spokesperson. And so after each committee meeting and at each subsequent board meeting, Mr. Luther will share the work of the group. And so, Mr. Luther.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Robert Luther, and I am a very proud father of 3 kids, 2 of which who are in our school district, one at St. Clair Middle School and one at Gearing Elementary School. And I'm honored to be given the opportunity to help out on this committee and obviously be the spokesperson for the committee. So you'll get to hear me update you guys at every meeting after we meet to discuss what we've accomplished during our committee meeting until we reach an end to this project. So I was asked very quickly to kind of go through what we accomplished on our first meeting. So I have a list of bullet points that I'll share very quickly. And as the time goes on, you'll hear more from what it is that we hope to accomplish and when we accomplish it. So first and foremost, we sat down as a group, 21 members of our group, and we worked on the committees, the times when we're going to meet, and we agreed upon times that we'll meet, times that we will get together, which will be on Tuesday nights every other week at 4:15 for a 2-hour meeting to discuss all of the information that has been presented to us to formulate some opinion. In the last meeting where we met together, there's a handful of things that we were able to accomplish. First and foremost, the setting of the schedule, and then the understanding of our role as committee members, and that we are merely to just weigh in and provide information and feedback based on the information that's presented to us to share with you as the board to help make the final decision. A couple of very interesting things that were brought up at the meeting that we had on Tuesday night was a binder of information that was presented to us for us committee members to go through to start weighing out some of the ideas that have been presented, some of the opportunities that we have to share and to make our decisions, to help make our decisions. And and I'm not going to go through it all just for time, but what it gave us the opportunity as a committee to immediately start talking about opportunities and ideas. So we broke out into a group discussion after we walked through the contents of this binder, and we had a round table discussion in small groups. And in our very first time together, we started working on having an open discussion about some ideas, asking questions, and what we came away with, and one of our tasks at the end of that group discussion was to be able to formulate what more information we need as a group to help us look at everything that has to be decided upon and what questions we need answered. One of the decisions as a group that we made coming out of our meeting too is how are we going to communicate this information with family and community members who are asking about how these meetings are going if they're not able to come tonight or to any of the meetings to discuss or to hear what's being discussed. And we're putting together some outreach for the community in the form of a feedback forum that will be put on the website, an opportunity for family and community members to share their feelings. I think it was important that we came away with the idea that we want to be proactive in our ability to share information. And by being proactive, hopefully it'll help, I guess, the community who will all have a part in what goes on after this decision is made by being able to share their feedback and how this might impact them. So we're going to take that information, we're going to funnel it in a manner that we can accommodate it, and we can look at it, and then we can then communicate back to the community who has questions. And we're going to continue to make sure that the forum is open so that people can openly share with us. So let's see. I'm honored to be able to share. I have not much more else to share today. If you have any questions at all, I'd be happy to field anything that might have came from our first meeting, but our next meeting is next Tuesday night, and I'm looking forward to getting back together with our group and continuing on the process. So,
Just a quick
sure.
question, and maybe address it to Dr. Skolka. Public comments coming in.
Sure. A couple of things. Let me build off of what Robert has shared. On the website, we have right under the election information, there is a post that gives the 5 dates and times, and next to each, once a committee meeting has been held, next to that date and time, there will be a link to the minutes of that meeting. So the minutes of our first meeting are posted right now. Anyone who would like to keep up, who maybe either can't be there or just interested in knowing what the committee is doing, can always go there. After each meeting, we will post the minutes, and that'll be on the website. The other thing, as Robert shared, we will have a feedback form that will also be posted at the same place. So you'll have the 5 dates of the meetings, you'll have the minutes as the meetings are held, and then another link that will allow someone to provide feedback to the committee. That form, is in development. It'll be approved by the committee at Tuesday's meeting, and it will be subsequently on the website, hopefully Wednesday or Thursday, the day after the committee meets, once we get committee approval on that. That should give people the opportunity to, again, share their feelings. Last spring, a lot of email was regarding the thinking was sent to board members via the board email address. Certainly, we're not saying that folks can't do that by any means. That email address is certainly still there, but we would really like the opportunity for them to funnel those comments, suggestions, and other feedback to the committee to digest, to work through, because that's part of their role, is to be that spokes group and to digest and to kind of do the legwork for the community as a whole. So that's coming next week.
Thank you.
I have
Any other
a
questions?
question.
Mr. Folsom?
Are these meetings open to the public?
They are open to the public. They are not for public participation.
Right.
Right,
you
but
can
they are
come.
certainly open to the public. We sat out chairs at the last meeting, had a couple of people there. We took their contact information so as to make sure that we stay in touch with anybody who shows.
Because I remember Washington, that was
Yes.
open to the public
Absolutely.
also. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you
Mr.
very
Luther,
much
thank
for
you so
letting me
much
share.
for volunteering.
Absolutely. It was not a hard decision.
Next item in the elementary school closure is the initial transportation and school of choice information. Dr. Skolka.
President Br and Board of Education members, thank you so much. We're continuing here our conversation from September 22nd, in which we shared some initial information with you regarding whether or not we could go from 5K5 buildings to 4K5 buildings, some of the obstacles to overcome, whether or not we would move 5th grade into one or both of the middle schools. And so a next logical part of that discussion and conversation starts talking about aspects both of transportation and choice. So again, as I said, we talked about class sizes and sections where students live, facilities. Let's now talk about transportation choice and ask you to reflect on a couple of questions here tonight. Before I jump into that, though, Mr. Treasurer Folsky asked about capacity. And it would be really nice if there was a simple answer about capacity, but capacity is all in the decisions that we make as to how certain facilities will be used. So for example, ideally, I could say minimally there's regular classrooms, an art room, music room, special education room. In some of our buildings, the music room can only be used for music. In a couple of our other buildings, a regular classroom is used for music. And therefore, if we needed to then convert that back into a classroom for, say, a 4th grade class or a 3rd grade class, and put music on a cart, so to speak, and have music tracks, that would increase potentially capacity because we could have more students. And so these are kind of, it's tough to say how many students is capacity. What's more important is how many classrooms can be used for regular education classrooms. That's the way we think about capacity, because even when we talk about how many students, we have to, again, down here in this corner, we know that by our master agreement, K2 is 29. Well, if we have more 3-5 classrooms, we have more students. Special ed classrooms are often limited to 15. Right? If we choose to have one or more special ed programs in a particular building, then does that affect capacity? Absolutely. So it's not that we're looking at trying to dodge the question. It really is in what programs you have in the buildings determine your capacity. And lastly, at the secondary level, it's always important to know that teachers teach in a 6-period day, teachers are teaching 5 periods. So 1 period a day, that room is essentially empty. The teacher has it during their planning. But if you really wanted to, or if you needed to, or had to, if we had that many students, wouldn't it be wonderful? We would have them, traveling teachers, using the different rooms, and our capacity would go way up.
Right.
That's, again, how classrooms are used. Okay. So let's talk a little bit of transportation. And I want to say that on September 22nd, all the information we gave you spoke to this concept of dividing evenly. So as I said, in alphabetical order, if we were to close Eddy, all right, and there was 56 kindergartners, the information that I shared on the 22nd how would that room utilization work if 28 went to one building and 28 went to the other? And somewhere in that explanation, I shared that that's just not going to be possible across every single grade level. No matter where we draw the line or how we do that, it's going to fluctuate in some way or another so that some grade level isn't even. So working with Mrs. Livingston in transportation, we took a couple of actual scenarios this time around. And in this particular case, it is, again, looking at Eddy first, Clinton Road. In other words, if that became the line, that right there is Gearing Elementary. Okay? So I want to make sure that we know that because we'll come back to that, but that's where Gearing is. And here's that. So everything to the south or everything in this corner, if these students were to go to Pine and these students were to go to Gearing, what would happen? Well, I used the exact same methodology as I used 3 weeks ago. And instead of dividing students exactly evenly, these 56 kindergarten students, all right, 28 and 28, we did the work with the transportation software to determine where those 56 kindergartners lived. And we found out that with a line of Clinton Road, that 42 of them would end up at Gearing, okay, and 11 of them at Pine. And so forth and so on all the way down to the point where, in this particular case, at Gearing, where these 2 sections became evenly divided, 1 and 1, now became 4, and we could accommodate these 11 in the existing 2 sections at Pine. So it's still only 4 sections in this particular case. But I want to point out the fact that 57, I have it in red because it is a troublesome number for me moving forward and thinking about this, because again, contract language back here says 29 students K2. 57 means 29 and 28. It means you have 1 available seat for anybody who might move into that area. Once we use that 1 available seat, if a second student, kindergarten student, and the same in 1st grade, because the same, again, we're projecting out similarly for the following year, what would end up happening is that student would then have to be considered an overflow student, and we would have to bus them maybe down to Pine or another of the elementaries, or we'd have to create another teaching section, thereby making 3 and thereby increasing our costs and expenses. Okay? As we go through this, we can see that these two sections, and we keep going through, and eventually 13 minus 13, Eddie, we've moved all of the Eddie students. But the 13 sections, when they're split out using Clinton Road as the divider, actually turns out to be 11 more sections at Gearing, 3 more sections at Pine, or 14 sections. And that was understandable because we weren't dividing them evenly, and as a result, this particular dividing line, given where existing class sizes were, actually causes an increase of 1 section from where we were before. So that would be an added cost of a section. Okay? What else? Well, increases the number of bus routes by 1, and one considers, well, how could that be so when you're actually going from 5 schools to 4 schools? Let's not forget that Eddy is our most neighborhood school. It has the most number of walkers, and now all of those students are on buses. And so we're actually transporting more students, and in this particular case, it would add a bus run because we could not fit those students completely on existing runs. 11 more classrooms at Gearing, that's not possible under the scenario we talked about last month, or 3 weeks ago. Even if we were to move the 5th grade to St. Clair Middle School, 7 more classrooms at Gearing is still not possible if the early childhood program stays. It eliminates the 2 multi-age classrooms at Pine because those numbers don't work out anymore in order to create a multi-age. But the net is one additional teaching section, which I talked about previously. If we've been using the $80,000 figure as our figure for budgeting when we reduce a teaching section, which we did this past year, reduce 8 across the district, 2 more with kindergartens that didn't show up, then we ought to use that $80,000 figure if we're planning to add a section potentially. I already mentioned the fact that in kindergarten and 1st grade we have 1 available seat, and that is a potential issue. And 88 3rd grade students at Gearing presents a similar issue because 88 3rd grade students across 3 sections, 30 per class makes 92 open seats. And of course, increased bus and car traffic at Gearing, which may result in a request for site work. And site work can, new bus routes, new traffic patterns, something like that, potentially might not, isn't, we would first want to see how it worked out. So that line right there had the imbalance that we showed as opposed to the divide evenly. What if we moved up to this asterisk here? That's Vine Street. That would send these group of Eddy students down to Pine River. Will that make it a little bit better, a little easier? Well, one thing to also consider, if that is the dividing line, and we'll show the numbers here shortly, please understand that kids and students living there would be passing Gearing, their nearest elementary, to go down. Not that huge of a deal, but they would certainly go past one elementary school to get to the elementary school to which they would be attending. So what about Vine Street? Well, this was the Clinton Road, and we saw that 42 kindergartners when we draw that line. When we draw the Vine Road line, we pick up 6 more to go to Pine. So we're getting a little bit closer to that evenly divide scenario, right? Not there yet. Right? And school of choice, these are students not affected in this. These are students who are not in the Eddy attendance zone that we would need to find space. We would have to account for. Again, bus route would increase by 1. Gearing is south of Vine, so some students would be on a bus that passes their closest elementary. In this particular case, there's 10 more classrooms at Gearing in a K-5 scenario, so we wouldn't have a K-5, we'd want to go K-4. 6 more classrooms could be possible, especially if we created a first, second multi-age classroom. Causes the creation of an additional or 7th class section of both kindergarten and 1st grade across Gearing and Pine. and it may be possible to get 2 sections back by creating multi-ages at Pine River. I'm going over this without showing those numbers here on slides. In the report that I sent to you, it has all of those numbers. All right? That report, again, will be posted along with the video of the board meeting, as we do a couple of days after every board meeting. Okay? Those were 2 scenarios for Eddy. What about a scenario in which Gearing closed? And what would transportation and what would the division of students look like? Well, in this particular case, because Gearing's attendance zone crosses the entire east-west width of the school district, you could send students not only to Eddy here, to Pine here, but we could also send students to Palms from the very western section, basically from Kendall Road down in this section right here. In this scenario, again, we reduce further and we more balance the idea so that we would send 33 kindergartners to Eddy. So I want to go back real quickly. We've gone from 42 changing to 36 to now 33. So we're getting more in that idea of trying to get even or balance evenly so that we can at least have conversations, better conversations about whether this would work. Okay? Same way across the rest of the grade levels. What happens here? Well, no additional bus routes are required. In this particular scenario, we are able to put the students on existing routes, especially because the west side, those folks would go down to Palms, and as is our rule of thumb, no student would be on a bus for longer than an hour. That's a large concern for us, and we try to maintain that rule of thumb. It does add 1 teaching section at Palms, but they have the classroom space within a K-5 configuration to do that. 5th grade, though, would have to be moved to St. Clair Middle in order to accommodate the other students at Eddy and Pine. At first glance, it appears that early childhood program could be housed at Pine River in this scenario of closing Gearing. The Clinton Road scenario concern of 57 kindergarten students and 1st grade students at Pine River, leaving 1 section. It exists as well. More than 1 new student would need to be sent to another building or another teaching section added. We still have that concern. And we would still have increased bus and car traffic at Eddy, though not as substantial as before, because some more of those kids are headed to either Pine or to Palms. So before I jump into school of choice considerations, these are just a few of the lines. Obviously, we can keep drawing lines. We can keep trying to move kids around. And that's what this process is. It's a series of iterations to try to find something that, in the process of doing all of this, actually provides savings and doesn't eat back into any savings that would be achieved through closing a building by having to add staff because of how the kids fall out in the different grade levels. So we're going to continue to draw lines. We're going to continue to do scenarios.
Yeah, because if Palms is at 81% capacity and Bell River's at 80% capacity, it seems as though we ought to be able to maybe move some students into the Bell River as well.
Absolutely. Okay. That's some transportation considerations for us to think about, and for you folks to just know how that works, because the idea that we could just divide these kids evenly isn't going to work, even though that was a great starting point 3 weeks ago for a discussion about grade configurations, K4 versus K5.
Well, we understand that we can't divide equally, but there's that big chunk of kids that are right in the middle that could come south. You're not nowhere in any of this are you bringing.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Some of the Pine River kids
Correct.
that live at the south end of the Pine River area could come south. They could go to Bell River or they could go to Palms too.
And that's some, again, you're absolutely right. That's some more lines to draw. What we took right now for this explanation, for this starting conversation, was the existing Eddy district and the existing Gearing district. Okay. But obviously, and we've got work to do.
Right.
Okay.
I have a, can we,
Yes, go ahead.
before we move on,
We have,
the gearing traffic you're talking about, years ago, we tried to put a, if I recall it, another driveway in, and the
Okay.
county or state or something said no, because it'd be too close together. You couldn't, we were looking for an in and out, and they said no, so I don't know if that's possible nowadays, but back when we did look at it, to have an in and out, and they said no.
Well, that's great information because I did not know that.
Right.
Yeah.
Is, with all this scenario, would the special ed still stay at Gearing? Or that has to be,
Right now, closing of
getting at
Eddy,
it yet?
closing of Eddy, we were counting on it still staying at Gearing.
okay,
Closing of Gearing, it would move to Pine.
okay. And the other question I have, that map you showed about the kids going to Palms?
Yep.
Okay. Where would they go to middle school? Would they go back up to St. Clair then?
Conversation to have. Right now, we're just, right
Right.
now, as I understand it, when Washington's lines were redrawn, right,
Right,
it meant that some students went to Bell for elementary, but they were considered Marine City Middle students for secondary.
okay.
that didn't change
Right.
then. It was like that before Washington closed. I know there's a
Yeah.
misconception going on here, but that's not when that changed.
Okay.
It's just not.
Well, help me out, because what I'm understanding is that the secondary boundary never changed. It was the elementary boundary that changed to move some of those kids to Pine. So Mr. Folsky's question was, would the secondary boundary have to change as well? And I don't believe there's precedent or for that.
I'm just saying the kids would come to,
It
you know,
could-
actually, it is closer for them to go to Palms than it is to Gearing.
Correct.
But they're, middle school, are they gonna
Mm-hmm.
have to go back up? You know, so I'm thinking of the fourth, fifth graders are there for 1 year,
Mm-hmm.
and then they gotta shoot back up to, over to St. Clair? I don't know. That's what,
Right.
or,
I know when we did not change the secondary boundaries.
Didn't change the secondary boundaries. Right.
No, but so that the students that go to Pine River, they don't school a choice to Marine City Middle.
Correct.
Okay, well, I've had a
Correct.
lot of emails, people asking me
Yeah.
that that's what
Yeah.
we're putting out there,
No.
and that's not what happened.
No, that's not the case at all.
Okay.
Yep. No, the secondary boundaries didn't change. Secondary boundaries would not have to change here either, if that were the case. I think the other thing to consider as we're doing this, and you can take a look at it just here, this map does not have every single road, but there are far fewer roads the further west we get than there are here. And so for us to transport makes it a little bit more difficult in terms of the driving around too, but we'll work on that. We do want to talk a little bit about school choice considerations. Currently, approximately almost 11% of our students participate in one form of school of choice or another. In fact, 466 of our students. This is a table. You have more detailed information, school by school breakdown in your report. Again, that report will be posted online once in the next day or so, once we have the video from the meeting. Okay. In district, it's school by school breakdown. County choice, we also have the information as to from which other school districts outside the county students are coming to us from. And then there's the group of employee choice in district and also in the county. So as we potentially draw new lines, we have to also understand how that may or may not affect choice and people's desire to choose, and people's just history and the fact that they have been a choice student and whether or not that will continue, whether or not basically we're going to rewrite any choice rules.
Do we know, is this standard throughout the state or the county, these kind of numbers?
I would say that that's a little bit light, 10.8%. My former district, we were well over a quarter of
Of
our
school
population
choice.
was choice, primarily out of county, not out of county, out of district.
Right,
Excuse
but
me.
we're higher in district. I
That's
guess
right.
that was my question.
I think this is, I can't speak to the fact with certainty, you will have more county choice if you are a neighboring district to a struggling school district.
Makes sense.
I'm going to be blunt. I know I'm on television and everything else. I'm going to be blunt.
I can read between
Okay.
the lines.
Parents will choice their students to the neighboring district. They won't go through that neighboring district to yet another district. They're not going to drive two districts.
But as far as in-district, our numbers might be a little high.
They might be.
Yeah, okay.
But the numbers of class sizes are factoring in these schools of choice
Absolutely.
numbers.
Absolutely. District programming. Revenue, of course, is based on enrollment, as we've talked about a great deal, and enrollment is impacted by, now here's where I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit, if you don't mind. State and local economy. The state and local economy, we know that we've had a very difficult time over the last 10 years, especially since 2008, 2009. And as a result, in the last census, the 2010 census, we became the only state in the union to lose a congressional seat. All right? We don't have, right here in our school district, this school board, this administration does not have a great deal of control over the state and local economy. Right? We are impacted by that, by the number of jobs, by the folks leaving the state, those kind of things. I cannot say, and I said at Rotary today, I cannot speak more highly or more excitedly about the work our staff and students are doing. All right? Just last week, 2 marching bands, Division I ratings. All right, exemplary ratings all across the board. Right? 2 state championships last year in athletics. 1 7-0 football team, 1 6-1 team, a soccer team that's doing great, an outstanding theater performance 2 weekends ago, Brighton Beach Memoirs, and then that's not even counting the academic awards and the academic accomplishments our kids make. All right? We are not in this particular financial situation as a result of a lack of quality in this school district. If schools continue to be funded solely based on enrollment, and this state continues to lose people, well, we know what the impact will be. State and local population directly tied to state and local economy. Again, we don't have a great deal of control over that, potentially. The legislature and the foundation allowance. Mr. Longuski has spoken repeatedly to you about the fact that in 2009, every district in the state took a $470 per student proration. And we have not come back from that. Not only have we not come back from that, no district has come back from that. We've been penalized further for being an out of formula district prior to Proposal A. So as other districts maybe get twice the foundation increase, or most recently 3.5 times the foundation increase, we receive a smaller increase each time.
You said that was 2009, right?
2009-10 school year. It happened in the spring of 2009 for the 2009-10 school year. Okay. Again, we can lobby, we can talk to our state senators, our state legislators, et cetera, but in the end, the legislature is going to decide how much that foundation allowance is. The legislature is also going to define what a public school is. What I mean by that is uncapped charters. What I mean by that is not just brick and mortar charters who don't play by the same rules, but also online charters operated by out-of-state entrepreneurs. Every single time that they do, every single time that occurs, that's less money that comes out of the state school aid fund for the remainder of the traditional schools, who again are doing an outstanding job in the classroom, on the athletic fields, in the auditoriums, everywhere else. All right? Again, little or no control over that. District programs, quality and variety. This is where we have control. We have quality programs, right? And we get to choose how many programs, what type of programs, and the variety of those programs. So again, I've said repeatedly over the course of the last few months, as we think about controlling, as we think about, excuse me, not controlling, but as we think about moving forward to erase this deficit, we must think about it not just in ways of cutting and reducing, but how do we grow, even though we might not be bordering potentially a district that might be struggling. Okay? And it's really not about rating each other's kids. It really isn't. Unfortunately, that's kind of the system that's been set up, and I really wish that it wasn't that case. Okay? But we do have control over this, so I'm going to challenge here tonight and ask you to reflect, if not debate, at least think about whether or not we're willing to invest some money in programming as well as just reducing. There's our Points of Pride poster for the year. All right, that's 10-point down there, and I'll tell you what, we cut out things that we had so many more other ones we could have put on there. Again, all right, we are not in this situation as a result of poor quality in this school district. All right, this is an excellent school district. So some questions, please, that not only the administration but the committee that has been formed to get at information, gather information, provide you with some recommendations, some things that we will need coming up here in the weeks to come. We need some direction. Part of that direction is, where do we stand on the different configurations and programming in different parts of the district? Not just between North and South, but within North and South as well. I think 3 weeks ago, I caught a little bit of a sentiment that, it might be okay to have a 5-8 middle school in one side, one 5-8 middle school and one 6-8 middle school. We didn't have to do the same thing. Well, is that kind of thinking going to carry the day when we think about things like STEM programs? The potential to improve our programs, the things we have control over, all right? The quality and the variety of our program, we have control over that. Do we implement a STEM program? But I will tell you, we cannot afford to do so at every single elementary school. We don't have that kind of finances right now, all right? So, do we do it? Maybe at one end and not the other, or in one building in one end, or one building in each end and not the other. Is this something that is acceptable as we move forward? All right? Or, and it's okay, or we'll do it when we can do it everywhere. One question for discussion. I got 3 of them. We can go through all 3 questions, or we can go one by one.
The K-5 structure,
Yes.
doing K-4 in the north end, do we know, does that alleviate this capacity problem in the elementary schools?
It opens the door to at least consider going to 4 elementaries.
Okay.
We cannot close an elementary and fit all the kids in, at least in year 1, at least next year,
Right.
remaining K-5 in all the 4 remaining buildings.
How many classrooms will that open up, moving 5 into?
Somewhere in there, your 5th grades, I believe next year there's 3 5th grades scheduled for Pine, 1 at Gearing, 2 at Eddy, so 6 overall.
Would that open up for new students coming in?
Not necessarily.
No?
No,
Okay.
all that does is give you the space in order to move out of a building. The way you'll have more space for students is to add more teachers.
Because you showed there where there was room for 1 student here,
Yep.
1 student there.
Right.
That would stay the same.
That would stay the same. Because basically, what you're doing is you're just moving sections from one place to the other.
Correct.
As we said 3 weeks ago, when we talked about why it was maybe easier and you had more savings when Washington closed, was because at that time, class sizes were significantly lower.
Correct. Yep.
So you had more room to move those kids into existing sections. Existing sections right now, no, we're just moving section for section.
And we're talking now maybe a little sooner than we did at Washington, because our projections still show that those section numbers in following years will go down.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
The other point is that, again, this assumes that the number of students in a classroom remains the same,
correct.
which that is not necessarily the case. So in other words, there may be more openings, John, depending upon what agreement they
Right.
reach over next summer with.
Okay, so less fifth graders come in next year at one particular school, that could open up. Is
You
that
could
what you're saying?
literally have, if you added, at schools, you added another child per, in terms of number of students allowed in a classroom, you literally would add greater number of students. Now, you wouldn't add 100 students, but you certainly would add a few here, a few here, a few here, and after a while, you probably have something. I mean, I'm not saying you guarantee it, but you certainly are opening it up.
Okay, okay.
This question also is really only speaking K4, K5, it's speaking STEM, but things that we can also continue to discuss if we're willing to have these conversations are, again, revisiting the issues of K2, 3, 5s, because that will bring more of the same age group together, so you can spread those students out so that maybe you do open more seats. That has an opportunity. And also, balanced calendar, also referred to as year-round school. All right. I will tell you that Port Huron, of course, went to a couple of buildings with year-round school. I would guess at least 2, if not 3 other school districts in our county are looking at it and are hoping to implement for next year.
Did we ever look at how much that would cost to start?
We didn't get that far because basically the idea was, let's just get into next year. We're too late in the year. Yeah.
I know
But
it-
I apologize for cutting you off.
No, that's
But
fine.
what I'm looking for is a little bit of direction of, yes, we want to know those numbers. We're willing to entertain that idea, even if it costs us a little bit more. Then
Well,
we'll,
we
Oh,
want
I
those
think we
numbers.
need to know. I watched one of the presentations when Algonac was looking at it.
right.
And they estimated around $40,000, which I don't, that was just their
Yeah.
presentation. So I
Sure.
think we'd want to know if,
Right. Yep.
Or
Did they
is
happen to ask whether or not they were going to do any retrofitting for AC? Because we have 2 buildings that would accommodate it without any
you know,
infrastructure.
This was one of their board meetings that was up on their website.
Okay.
I could probably find out if there's still a link to it.
Okay. Yep.
When looking at Croswell, that's been a successful program
Very much so.
and has increased in
Mhm.
year-round school students
Correct.
every year.
Yep, very much so. And they did it not as a whole building. They
Right.
did it as as individual sections within a building. They did not have buildings that were air-conditioned, and so elementary started in the middle school in the summer and then moved back. I don't think that would not be something necessarily we'd need to do, because both Pine and Bell and Gearing, all 3 have the ability to climate control. I won't call it air conditioning, I'll say the ability to cool. And make it a good deal. Okay.
Before you move on, I'd
Yes.
like to speak to the question you've got on the STEM program, whether or not it would be acceptable if funding is such that it's in 1 building or 2 buildings. My thought on that is that with whatever funding is available, to use that for STEM in the best manner we can, not keeping it from everyone, because depending, we're working schools of choice, we're working a lot of different things, but
Right.
through school of choice, it would, no matter where the location would be, I think it would be available
Great.
to
Okay,
everyone.
excellent.
I agree. If we've got grants and foundation money out there for that STEM program, I think it's something that we need to put in. Knowing that we can't put it in every elementary school,
Right.
but we've got to start someplace.
We have identified a grant opportunity for elementary STEM, not sufficient to put it into all 4 schools. And obviously not a guarantee that we would get it either. But like the GM and Cargill grants, we need to try. We need to make the effort to try. Okay. Where do we stand on investing in new programming? We've touched upon this a little bit. In a time of deficit, grant only or general fund use. Enrollment projection is to decrease another 70 to 80 next year. If we implement a STEM program at one elementary, that initial cost is going to be about $20,000 initially. And then there's ongoing consumables that are less than that. Without the benefit of grant money, if we did not receive any grants, then in essence what we would need is 3 new students, new to the district, right? Couldn't just be an in-district choice transfer. 3 new to the district to pay for that $20,000 investment. And I think, again, a little bit of the conversation I'm hearing is that we're open to the idea of potentially investing, even in a time of deficit, to grow programs and to attract students.
I would, on the STEM program, I would like to get initiated, get one at the north end and one at the south end going. Even like, so we get 3 new kids. Does Marysville have a grant? I mean, do they have STEM for elementary? And does
I'm not-
Algonac have it? I mean, it's something we can check into.
Right.
Because I think we could draw those 3 kids
Yeah.
with no problem at all.
Yeah.
I
We-
think, I mean, it's a
Absolutely.
gamble.
Absolutely.
I realize it.
Yep.
It's a gamble, but
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this. I think we should start one at the north end and one at the south end,
Okay.
just to get the ball rolling. Is there any way we can get preliminary numbers, or is that?
Preliminary
say,
numbers of what? We know preliminary
enrollment,
cost
saying
numbers.
that we
No.
could, if
Not
we,
necessarily.
if we say, hey, we're gonna go STEM at Palms,
Well,
are we gonna, hey,
Mhm.
kid from Algonac say, yeah, there's 10 or 12 kids gonna come? Is there a way we can,
you've done an excellent job of foreshadowing the next question. Where do we stand on schools of choice? Again, 10% or 11% of our student enrollment is involved, 1 in 10. Are we going to change the school of choice rules to the extent that we can by law? In other words, in-district school of choice, we have the opportunity to change those rules. County school of choice, we can't send them back, nor would we want to. They are our students. They are East China students. They are contributing to our student body, our community in very, very positive ways. But to John's point, all right, if we put in STEM, okay, at one building, and we allow in-district school of choice to say, well, if it's in that building, now I all want to go there, and all those seats are taken up, you're not going to get 3 new FTE. You're not going to pay for that. So are we going to limit, are you willing to limit in-district school of choice rules? And I just mean further. It doesn't mean that you can't grandfather everybody who's here or everybody who's where they're at right now. It's just, are you willing to limit further or additional in-district choice so as to leave available seats for new county students?
I think we have to. I personally think we have to.
The only way you can pay
These
for
aren't
it.
easy decisions that we have to make, and I think we know that, but the deficit's not just going to go away by us hoping that, I don't know, we're going to get more money next year.
So Treasurer Folsky, where I can't say how many kids I think we would get, I would say that if we allowed that, if we did it at Palms, for example, and we let everybody then go to Palms within the district through choice, then the net is 0 and we've received nothing.
right,
You're going to have to
Okay.
keep some seats available.
okay. We got the STEM at the high school and the middle school. Has that drawn any out-of-state, out-of-district kids?
How many
Can-
kids involved in STEM? Anybody?
Maybe
help me
Mike
on
can
that?
help us out?
Maybe that's a great question for us to go with get the
It's
committee
just
and
something
get
maybe we can
further
look into.
information for you.
Since we got STEM at the middle school, has that drawn kids
Right.
from other districts?
Mhm.
And maybe if that does, that could follow.
It drew kids back.
We had some kids students that were living in the district but were going to schools outside of East China School District because they wanted to accelerate math and science. we drew some of those students back to each China school.
Well,
So then I would say
that's the
yes.
same.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is
so
the
it would
same.
be a yes.
I'm just wondering if that's going to filter down to the elementary
Yeah.
then,
I
think it would
would
be
think
more
so.
popular with the
by going
elementary.
Yes.
one at each location.
I think so. And we
I
might be
know it's a
ear-
gamble, but I,
and we might be early in our high school numbers, having just implemented
Right.
the classes.
okay.
Well, there's another consideration too, that all that assumes is that nobody else is going to do it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, somebody in some other school district close by may be having this very same discussion right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that personally, I think we focus on our people and we do what best we can for them. And when we were discussing earlier which schools to close, there were savings by doing one particular school that weren't available by doing a different school. That's one consideration, but this is something that feeds into that very consideration because now we're looking for other funds. Well, those funds may come from a savings of one particular choice as opposed to closing a different school, which doesn't save us the necessary amount of funding. I don't know the answers to any of those questions, but it is part of our decision process.
Right. So it's,
I would also think that the other school districts are,
oh,
those
absolutely.
people are they're dealing with the same things we are.
Absolutely.
So they're going to be dealing with these issues.
I don't know of a district who's not wrestling with all of these things.
Right.
The,
But I think if we do a good job, which we are doing,
That's,
yeah,
yep.
that I can say, because I know two people who came into this district, who live in this district, that were going outside, that came back for that very reason.
that's good enough.
And again, Trustee McNamee makes a great point. Not if we do a good job, we are doing a good job. And I'll take the opportunity on CTV to once again say that our two high schools were 1 and 2 in the county in ACT. And that's just not the high school, that's the elementaries and middle schools that help put the basis and foundation for that education for those students in order to produce those results. Okay? So we are doing an outstanding job.
That's why I think STEM is so important, that if we are putting out that kind of a quality education, that we want to be on the forefront.
So, again, I'm not apologizing, but I'm just saying, this is messy. This process is messy. There's a lot to consider. There's a lot of layers to the onion. There's a lot of things to consider, a lot of lines to be drawn, and what happens if we do this, and there's many, many variables in this. We're going to continue to provide you this information. We're going to continue to ask for direction, either in the meetings themselves, or of course, give me a call, let us know. Talk to Mr. Br, President Br, and Trustee Richley, who are on the Citizens Committee, who are interacting with these folks on an every other week basis as well. Right? They can bring that information to the committee. The committee can wrestle with it to bring back to you folks. Several iterations before we can get to a spot where we're feeling comfortable.
I have one other quick comment to make about the school of choice for students.
Yes.
I know some people might take it the wrong way or whatever, but this school district, I look at it as we're in a customer service business. And if we change things around or whatever, we could end up losing some customers. And that's going to cost us money. I mean, our education is what we're here to do, and then customer service is what we gotta, that's the way I look at it, that you gotta.
Choice is such an ingrained part of all of our lives. And with the advent of Proposal A in 1990 and the choice legislation and all the charter schools, people are used to being able to say, if I'm not able to get what I want at the school closest, it's not really that big a deal anymore to take them somewhere else.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think based on the comments that we had here from the board and direction, you're going to continue to come back to us with additional lines drawn for different redistricting
I-
to move the kids around. Looking at the K-4
Mhm.
in the north end of the district where our crowding is most presented,
Sure.
to see what numbers would work at that, knowing that possibly bringing back, moving that out, we're opening up classrooms, but also eating up hiring teachers back in order to make all the kids fit.
Correct. It's great work for the committee to do on Tuesday. They can get some maps and start working with Mrs. Livingston present to help us from the transportation point of view.
You know, I look at this advisory committee and stuff, they might come up with an all different plan or something, or something that we're not looking at, or looking, that's why I like their input on it, to,
I mean, in the roundtables, there were some questions thrown out at our table that, brand new
Right.
ideas,
That's
brand
what I
new
mean.
thoughts. So I'm anxious to read the minutes from the meetings, and because I only sat at one table, and we did ask that Mrs. Vargo was going to turn us around, so we're sitting at different tables with different people each meeting, so that we get to know each other and the different ideas and comments from other people. So I'm looking forward to the meetings.
yeah, they might come up with something that's outside the box for us to consider.
The best possible scenario is that somebody solves this. 'Cause
We will solve it.
and I mean that because I'll give all the credit in the world to somebody who solves it,
Right.
you know?
Next item on agenda is closed session for the purpose of discussing negotiations. Is that the Board of Education, recommendation action that the Board of Education goes into closed session pursuant to Section Act 8C of the Open Meetings Act, Act 267 of 1976, that being for the board discussion connected with the negotiations of a collective bargaining agreement. A roll call vote. Mrs. Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mr. Folsky?
Yes.
Mr. Kennegbauer?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Risley?
Yes.
Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
So moved. We will go into closed session. We will come back after our closed session for our action item on the agenda. Thank you. We are back in open session. Action item number 5. Recommended action per administration recommendation, the Board of Education ratifies the tentative agreement 2014-15 between the Board of Education of the East China School District and the East China School District and Local 214 Teamsters, state, county, and municipal workers. Motion is needed.
So move.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. So carried. With that being our last item on the agenda, we stand adjourned.